Hello everyone, let us get started. Today is the day 3. So far we have actually um, covered like the basic operations, which is like related to input and output. Let me tell you, in day 1 I have actually told you about print, the various formats of print. Okay, and then print, it is like value you can specify, then separator, you can specify the separator over here, default is space. Then we can specify end the default line end is like my character is actually slash n. Then you can specify like this is again optional, everything is optional, so you can actually specify the file followed by the file descriptor, and then we can actually specify plus, and by default it is the default value is actually false, and we can actually set it as actually true. So it is a boolean value, it could be like either true or false. Okay, so we have gone through like multiple examples here. Then we have spent time on input as a function, and input we can actually specify prompt as well. Here we can say like the prompt, let's say you need some input in the real time or runtime, you need some input from the user, then definitely you can actually use a prompt. Okay, instead of using input, while using input you can definitely assign it to a variable, like variable equals to input. Then you can specify, let's say for example, enter your name. In this case it is going to store the name in the variable that, and you can retrieve the variables like directly, you can call the variables, and we can actually define exactly like the variable name should actually match with the exact case. So let us do one thing, like today I'm just going to cover like the variable definition basically. Okay, so what is a variable? So in variable we should definitely use a meaningful name. When I'm talking about like a meaningful name, it should not be like a equals to Subbu. This is actually not meaningful. Syntax is correct. In this case, the syntax is correct. Okay, but just ask yourself whether it is a, the variable name makes any sense? No, right? We should not use it. Then similarly, when you are actually using a equals to 10, b equals to 20, in this case, again, this is not meaningful. You can actually use like number 1 or number 2. Then in case of the first variable, you can actually use name. So don't use like variable name something like this, A, B, C or X, Y, G and all these things. So you should not use that. You should always use a meaningful variable name. Second, variable names, variable names, variable naming, you can actually use alphanumeric and underscore. Okay, let's say some meaningful variable names I can specify. Let's say for example, company equal to Google. It is possible. If you're giving like just underscore and then specifying Google, this is also going to work. Underscore is actually allowed. If you're specifying one company equals to Amazon, this is not correct. So variable name should not, this is incorrect. Okay, this is wrong. Variable name should not start with digits. Now if I'm specifying company 1 equals to Amazon, let's say Amazon, then this is actually correct. Okay, now if I'm specifying company underscore 1 equals to Walmart, this is also correct. So variable names, the rules around the variable names are variable name should be case sensitive. Like if it is uppercase, you should actually refer it as actually uppercase while calling the variables or referencing the variables. Let's say if I'm defining my variable here like name equals to Subbu, and I'm just specifying like print name, it is going to print Subbu. But if I'm specifying print name like this, it is not going to work. Error. Okay, because name, it is actually case sensitive, it is in small case. We have defined in small case, we have to refer in small case. So it is variable names are case sensitive. And variable names can contain special character, that is only underscore is actually allowed. if you are specifying, let's say I'm just specifying variable -1 equals to 20, this is invalid. Okay, this is wrong. This is wrong. So variable name should not contain hyphen like this. Okay, so let us see. Let us run to the example. Let me write a program. Python training, new Python file, and variable example. Okay, so in the variable example, let me increase the font little bit. Hope this is readable. So now in this case, let us try some like no variable naming over here, like name equals to Subbu. Here I've just given underscore equals to Amazon. Then I'm using company one equals to Walmart. Then I'm using over here, let's say num1 or num underscore 1 equals to 200. Num2 equals to 300. Now I'm just using print statements. Print name, it is going to work. And then I'm just using like another print statement, print, just put a underscore, that's it. I've seen like now in many real-time scripts, during the loops, let's say for example, while iterating the values, you need a temporary variable, let's say for I in list of values, and then you want to actually iterate. You can like instead of any variable name like I for iteration, you can definitely use the underscore over there. So now underscore is a valid variable name over here. Like if I'm executing print company one, we can get the value as well met. If I'm specifying print num underscore 1 comma num underscore 2, you can get like in this case you can get 200 and 300 in the same line. Now control shift F10, if you're using PyCharm, use control shift F10 to run the program. Here you can see the result like Subbu, Amazon, Walmart 200 and 300. Now let us look at here, like where I'm using like a print underscore. This is actually going to work, and then the output is Amazon. It should actually work as expected, and it should work in all the variants of like Python, because this is the rules around the variable names. Now when you are actually giving, let's say for example, I'm just giving like one company equals to Google, right? Here you can see error message. If you focus here, you can see end of a statement expected. This is the error message what you are going to get. It should be always like a string followed by the variable, but it doesn't say it should not start with a number. When you're actually giving a number, what's going to happen? Let us look at here. Like if I'm executing this, it is saying the error message here: one company Google invalid decimal literal, because we should not specify a digit before the variable name. Now the question is, when to use variable names are actually capital case. As per the best practice, this is not like this is not as per the syntax. This is as per the best practice. Best practice is something which the developers should follow. Yes, TP. I'll just cover that here. So now whenever you are actually using like variable names in capital case, let's say cnt equals to 100. Okay, now print cnt, print cnt, it is definitely going to work. Okay, so variable names can be actually capital case. The best practice what I was actually mentioning about the capital case, ideally in a program, whenever you see one variable should be actually constant, we do not have a constant keyword like for example in C, C++ or any other programming language you can actually define constant values, right? So here in Python, we do not have any keyword for constants. This is the workaround. This is the best practice which is followed across the Python community. Like people uses like the capital case variables if the value seems to be constant. If you're saying like cnt equals to 100, it doesn't mean that I cannot change it. I can definitely change it. I can specify cnt equals to 101 and then print CNT, it is also going to work. Okay, so now if I'm executing this program and the first value is 100, then the value is 101. So just to identify from your programs while starting up with your automation activities, so stick to a standard. Like whatever the program you are actually going to write, hundreds of program in next 5-10 years, what you can do is stick to the variable naming convention. If you are actually using anything where the scope is actually constant, use capital case. But please note, this is not the Python syntax. This is the best practice. So now there was a question in the chat, like now what is underscore again? So underscore is actually a valid variable name. For example, if I am having underscore equals to 100, underscore equals to 100, right? Print underscore, and then if you are actually using underscore equals to 200, then we can specify print underscore here. Let's double underscore. You can specify your double underscore equals to 300. Here I'm just executing print double underscore. Okay. Now, if I'm running this, it is going to absolutely work fine. The value we are going to get is 100, 200, and 300. Let me write another program because this is a special case. Now, new Python file, underscore, example. Okay, so now if I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, here you can see 100, 200, and 300. Thanks for asking. That's a really nice question, because underscore, you need to understand, it's not single underscore. You can actually use multiple underscores, 3 times, 5 times, 10 times, n number of times you can actually use it. Then one thing you should actually stick to the variable naming convention is, I have seen in some of the programs, if a legacy program, I've seen a variable name is actually more than 50 characters, 60 characters like that. Don't use that. Use meaningful names. Let's say, for example, I'm just giving customer underscore firm underscore address is equals to something. Instead of that, you can actually like customer, let's say firm ADDR, or you can say C underscore customer underscore home ADDR. Like, use short variable names. So at a later point of time, you should not type everything. Let's say while doing during the definition, it is easy. We can define anything. While accessing it, we have to type it again, right? So use a meaningful variable name, and the length should be restricted. Maybe RPD coding standard, whatever you're actually going to follow in your project, you should stick to that. Then variable names can be in any case, and we have gone through all the examples, right? So now this is all. Any questions?
Yeah. So what is the use case of using underscore as a variable?
Yeah, I'll just tell you. The use case of underscore, let's say, for example, this is actually outside the context what I'm covering at this moment. But as you're asking, let me tell you that. Let's say in a for loop, I have a list, okay? I have a list, let's say list is list 1 equals to, I can specify here 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, okay? Now, for underscore in list 1, I can directly say I'm using 4 spaces. That is 4 spaces and as the indent, that is Google standard 2 or 4 spaces. I have seen the programs where only 1 or 2 spaces are there. So feel free to specify spaces. Okay. So Python is actually very much sensitive about the indent. So now if I'm specifying here just print underscore, right? In this case, it is going to iterate all the values present in the list and pick 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. But the question is, do we really need a temporary variable over here? You can. Let's say you don't actually use underscore. Let's say it is actually a bit confusing. You can specify while item in list 1 print my item. It does the same thing. If I'm going to do this real-time implementations in the loops, prefer to use underscore as and when needed. But there is no hard and fast rule that you have to use underscore in the for loop or you have to use underscore in the looping only. It is not like that. You can actually use underscore anywhere you want. Okay, underscore in for loop, underscore in for loop, in for loop. Okay, so now look at here. This is my program. I'm just going to cover the loop list and everything at a later point of time. So for now it is fine. Just like now, just remember this much it is actually going to work. So now control shift F10 if I'm going to do, and then here you can see this is my first for loop result, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and 10, 20, 30, 50, 30, 40, 50. Can anyone, like there's a question for the group, can anyone tell me, I want to print, let's say in this case, I'm not using any separator, okay? In this case, I'm not using any separator. Can anyone actually tell me what I can actually do here to print everything in the one line? Anyone wants to give it a try?
ELD space, ELD blank.
I can actually use like a comma separator. Here I can specify like as a space. Then after the loop, I can definitely use a print just to print a new line. To print a new line, and then what I can do here is, let's say in this, I'm just going to use a separator as maybe I'm just going to use a separator as command. That's it. Now let us see like now what is the what will be the output here. Okay, so now if I'm going to run this program, let me write one more example. Now Python file underscore, okay, for example 2. Now in this case we are actually using separator. This is the real-time use case of separators. Okay, real-time use case of separator. You can look at here like now the separator is actually going to work. Okay, so now control shift F10. If you do, here you can see the separator is actually okay. So what is happening here is underscore it is not taking. So I'll just see the separator. Ideally it should actually take, it should, oh sorry, I did a mistake. It should be end, not separate. Separator is actually used for word separator and statement separator, unit or line separator, it is actually end. Okay, so it is not separator. So now control shift F10. If you do, here you can see like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 and 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Okay, so end is actually because print is going to print in lines. Like now let's say for example I'm having 5 values. In this case it is actually going to be iterated 5 times, right? So to print everything in one line, definitely what you can actually do is you can definitely use the end, because you want all the lines to be printed one after another, where the separator is actually line separator is actual space in the first for loop. In the second for loop we can actually use underscore. So the underscore is actually going to work, okay, in the real time, and we can actually use it. Now going back to my next topic over here, like yesterday I told you to deal with like how to deal with input using the input function. And all the examples, whatever we have gone through yesterday, it was actually taking only one variable as input. I can only one value as input in the runtime, right? So this is what you are familiar so far. Now, what if you want to pass two values? Let's say in the same line, two values in the same line. Let's say my program is something like this, print. I'm just giving like an example of input, and then here I'm just specifying, let's say number 1 equals to read, it's not read actually, input, enter num1. Okay, so now let's say I want num2 as input. I can specify num2 like this, input as num2. Now here I'm just going to do differently. Let's say for example names, I'm just giving like names or name1 comma name2 equals to I can specify here Subhasis or Subbu. Here I can say, let's say Rajul. Okay. Let us see like what's going to happen here. Like now let's say I'm having num3 comma num4 equals to 100 comma 200. Now let us print all the values like print num1, num2, num3, then num4. Okay. There is nothing wrong in the syntax, but Python is actually going to flag. Let's say if I'm copy paste this program in the Python, you can see it is suggesting like whenever you are having a comma separated like the values over here, specify a space. That is not part of the syntax, but from the code readability perspective, the ID perspective, you should actually give a specify a space over there. Let's say, for example, I want to print num1 and num2. I can definitely use that num1 and num2 here. I can specify, sorry, name1 and name2, name1, comma, name2. I can actually do that. Let's say when you are actually going to execute this program, what will be the result? Let us look at it. Multiple variable assignment. This is example of multiple variable assignment. Okay, so now when we are doing like now multiple variable assignment, let us see what we are actually going to get here. Now Control Shift F10. It is asking for the num1 and just giving 11. Num2 is 22. Now here see the result. Num1 is 11, num2 is 22. It is printing num1, num2, num3, and num4. It is printing 11, 22, 100, and 200. Subbu and Rajul. Okay. So now here, if you are looking at this syntax, we can specify multiple variables, or we can actually do the assignment, initialize multiple variables in the same line. This is one kind of variable assignment, multiple variable assignment. In Python, we do have another kind of variable assignment too. Let's say, for example, I have counter 1 cntr1 equals to cntr2 equals to cntr3 equals to cntr4 equals to 200. In this case, all the counter values will be like 200 at the initially. Let's say, for example, print. If we do print of counter 3, cntr of 3, and let us see like what is the output we are actually going to get. Again, this is again another type of variable assignment, and you should understand the internals. It is bit tricky. I'm just going to tell you. So now variable assignment, then 2. Here we go. This is very small example. Control Shift F10 to run the program in Python. Here it is saying like the counter 3 value is actually 200. Now the question is, if I'm having the value like this, here you can see that is actually asking the reformat the file. Let's, for example, in Python, if you're actually getting like something highlighted and then it's saying like there is something wrong, here you can see just focus on this and you can say reformat the file. It is going to reformat the file and it will correct everything. Like it is giving a space before and after the assignment. Even if you are not giving, it is also going to work, but ID is actually flagging it. Okay, so this is the best practices. So now let's say I'm just changing the value of counter 4 equals to 500, and here printing counter 1 value and followed by print of counter 4 value. Okay, now let us see. Now Control Shift F10, if you do here, initially you can see it here. The counter values were actually initialized to counter 1, counter 2, counter 3, counter 4. It was initialized to 200. Now what is happening here is we are actually changing the value of counter 4 as actually 500, and then accessing the value of like counter 1. In this case, counter 1 is actually 200, counter 4 is actually 500. Okay, so this is how it is actually going to work. Now going on little bit of detail, let me let me tell you in detail, like, internally how it is working, how it is storing the values. Let's say variable assignment, then example 4, Python
Yes,
5,
Subbu.
and yeah. So now print, if I do print, there is something known as ID. ID stands for identification. Like all the variables, all the identifiers is having ID. Let's say, for example, if I say, like, what is the ID of counter 1? And similarly, if I say, like, what is the ID of counter 2, and then counter 3 and counter 4, let us say, like, what are the identifiers? Initially, all of them will be actually pointing to the same identifier. Let's say Control Shift F10. Okay, now here you can see these are the identifier, these are the memory locations, okay, where this value 200 is actually getting stored. What the Python does is actually, in this case, it is not referring to multiple memory locations. Okay, so now let's say, for example, in this case, 200 Python is going to store this literal in a memory location. Let's say memory location is X. Now, whatever the variables you are actually using here, all of them, they will be actually pointing to the same memory location as long as this value is actually same. Let's say, for example, if I'm giving counter 5 equals to 200 again here, okay? Now, if I'm giving print ID of counter 5, okay, so now let us see here. Now Control Shift F10, the counter 5 we have not initialized in the same line. The value is same, like 200 here and 200 here. Counter 5 is actually pointing to the same memory location. In Python, how it is actually going to store it, I'm just going to tell you in some time. Okay, so let me take a snip, then explain you. Now this is a program where we have like, counter 1, counter 2, and counter 3, counter 4, right? So now in this case, let's say we are having a memory location X. This 200 is actually going to point to memory location X. Now here counter value is actually 200, and it is going to search in the memory, do we have any literal which is having 200? If yes, please refer here. The same location. That is the reason when we have, like, the output over here, like, 336, you can see everything is actually pointing to the same memory location. But what is going to happen if I am actually changing one of the value? Let's say, for example, in this case, counter 1, counter 2, counter 3, counter 4, and counter 5 is there, and I'm just changing the value of counter 1 to 500, and then print ID of counter 1. ID of counter 1. Now let us see. Now Control Shift F10, when you are doing, here you can see earlier it was pointing to a location where 200 is there, right? So in this particular location we are having 200. But the last one, you can see the counter one, the Python internal as soon as I told you, like, this is a little bit tricky. So this is how the Python organizes the variable in the memory, okay? So now if the values remain same, irrespective of, let's say, for example, if I'm going to do something, let me do not disturb this, and then I'll just go for another program. Now Python, the Python file, then here I'm just giving, like, a variable session. Okay, now let's say I have something like this. Okay, temp1 equals to Subbu, and print ID of temp1. Okay, ID of temp1. Now temp temp2 temp2 equals to, I'm just giving, like, Subbu again. Now print ID of temp2. Okay, now if I'm running this program, you can see even in this case also, if it is string, it is actually pointing to the same memory location, because this is how the Python internally works. Okay, let's say I'm just giving temp3 equals to temp2, temp3 equals to temp2. Now I'm just changing I'm just changing, sorry, I'm just checking like what is the ID of temp3, but the ID of temp3. Now in this case, it is also going to have the same ID. It is also going to have the same ID. Now temp3 is actually pointing to temp2. Now I'm just temp3. I'm just giving like hello, hello. Okay. So now let us see like what is the ID of temp2 and ID of temp3 after this reassignment. Control Shift F10 if you are going to do, then here you can see it is actually the temp2 is still pointing to Subbu, whereas the temp3 value got changed. Temp3 value is actually right now it is hello, and if you want to print it, like all the print values, print temp1, then temp2, then temp3. You can see how it is going to work. Control Shift F10. Here you can see Subbu, Subbu, and hello. Okay, so this is how the Python variable assignment works. So that's all about like the variable assignment. Now, the next use case I'm just going to tell you. The next use case, guys, you are actually familiar right now. You are familiar with variable definition, then variable assignment, right? Variable assignment and variable definition. Assignment and variable definition. Now, in the variable assignment, we did like the variable equals to value, var1 comma var2 equals to value1 comma value2. If it is string, then it has to be quoted. If it is numbers, you can actually use it as is. Then the third type of variable assignments what we have done, that is v1. I'm just using like no shortcut. V1 equals to v2 equals to v3. This is variable 1, variable 2, variable 3. We are initializing it to a particular value. It value could be anything. Value could be a string, value could be a float, value could be a list, value could be anything literally. So you can actually do that. So v1, v2, v3. In this case, the value remains like the same for all the variables. Now I'm going to tell you one more thing, like how do we take input in the same line while passing the input? Let's say, for example, I'm having like number one, number two, or number one equals to input of. Just giving here the prompt, enter, enter a number. So it is actually going to ask in the prompt like input, enter a number. It is going to store like num1. What if in the runtime instead of 10, I'm just giving like 10, 20, and 30? Is it going to take? Anyone wants to actually tell me like whether this line is actually going to work or we are going to get error? Or num1 value will be like 10, 20, 30. If it is 10, 20, and 30, then why?
It will take as a string.
Very nice. So it will be like the input will be like a string. So even if we are giving like 10, 20, 30, it is actually going to store 10, 20, and 30. It will be only one value. Now the question is, my requirement is I want something like this, like num1, comma num2, and I'll be having like no input of this value. In this case, system is definitely going to throw error. Why? Because it is one value. When we are talking about like a string, this is one string. And I do have like two variables in the left side, and I'm just getting like one value in the right side. So it is going to throw error. So how do we actually handle it? Okay. So to handle this type of scenario, what we need to do is after taking the input, let's say for example 10, 20, and 30, we do have like 10, 20, and 30 here, and this is a string. I want to split it. I want to split it. There is a function known as split, split, function known as split. Using split, what we can do, we can split the values. In this case, if I'm actually using the split function, let's say for example num1, num2, and here I'm just giving like split function, what it is going to do is it is actually going to split the values and store the first part. I mean only two values in this case. It is going to store like now if I'm specifying 10, 20, then num1 will be like 10, then num2 will be actually 20. This split I'm just going to cover in details during the string functions. So for now in input also we can actually use split function, And let me write an example over here, input with split. Now, Python file, multiple input. Okay, so now Python file here, and I'm just having this one. And then if I'm specifying here just a print statement like num1 and then num2, and running this program, here you can see it is asking for numbers. I'm just giving 100, then 200, 100 and 200. Here you can see 100 and 200. It is printing like num1 is actually 100. To differentiate it better, I can actually put together like this, like print num1 and num2, then control shift F10. Here I'm just giving 100 and 200. Here you can see 100 and 200. The value of num1 is actually 100, value of num2 is actually 200. But the type should be the type of these values over here right now. It will be only string. We need to explicitly do a typecast using the int. In the previous session, I have covered that, right? In the type, you can use like int of this particular variable over here, that is num1. Then it is actually going to cast the variable type as int. Okay, and we'll cover the casting in details in the later sessions. So now this is all about like how you can actually take the values in the runtime. Again, if your requirement is you want to read 3 names separated by comma, then how do I deal with it? How do I deal with it? Now look at here. Let's say I am having like name one, nm1. I'm just using like shortcuts here, nm2, then nm3. This is another type of variable for like enter 3 names separated by comma, separated by comma. Okay, now split. I can say like split. Then the split character is actually comma. Here I'm just going to print welcome name one, and then here I can say like welcome name two or hello name two. Then we can actually have another print statement where we can say like hi, then name3 and name3. Okay, so now if I'm running this program, here is Python is flagging, the ID is flagging like you have not given a space after the comma, and you have actually given extra space here, so you need to remove that. So if you follow the standard like for a month, then definitely at some point of time you'll be actually confident enough with the Python syntaxes. Okay, so whenever it is getting highlighted in any of your IDs you are actually using, please look at that message and then see like what's wrong. Control Shift F10. If I do like in the first case I'm just giving like 10 and 30, and in the second case 3 names I'm just giving like Subbu, Rajul. Here I can say like Subbu, let's say Rajul V. Now Tanmay Kumar Patra. Okay, now here you can see the output. It is taking like Subbu, hello Rajul V, hi Tanmay Kumar Patra. Okay, so now whenever, because name can actually contain spaces, right? In that case, you can actually split it using a separate character as well. So whenever you're actually taking input, you have to actually be careful. If your input is actually containing space, like in this case, Rajul V is actually containing a space here, right? So I cannot actually use the default split. So explicitly, I'm just using like comma separator over here to identify, okay, my input contains space, so I'm just separating the values using comma operator. So this is how you can actually deal with multiple inputs basically. Okay, so now with this we are done with the complete input operations. Input for one value, multiple values, then variable assignments. Then we are actually done with the print, various types of print. The next I'm just going to tell you is some basics around Python concepts. Okay, some basics. So now Python does have like character sets, as I've explained the other day. in the any language, just consider English, we do have character set. Every like no software, let's say for example, we are actually selecting a character set as actually UTF-8 or US English or UK English or anything like no character set we are actually selecting, right? And definitely in Python we do have character sets and we do have like no keywords. Okay, to print all the keywords, there was a question actually from the group, like how many data types are there and how many keywords are actually there. Okay, so keywords, we can actually print the keywords. Let me show you how to print the keywords. Now new file, sorry, new Python file, like keyword print Python file. Okay, now import. Don't worry about it, like now what is import and all. I'm just going to cover in details during the like now packages and modules. So don't worry about it. Okay, print keyword dot kw list, keyword dot kw list. Okay, there is no shortcut. You need to remember this. It will print all keywords. It will print all keywords. Now Control Shift F10 you do. Here you can see these are the keywords which is present in the Python language. It is like no false, none, true, and then it is enclosed in brackets. So that is nothing but the data type is actually list. So now here you can see there are many others. Okay, so here you can see not, nor, pass, then raise, return, try, while, wait, tailed, and everything over here. Okay, so you can actually specify all the keywords. Now you want it to be more readable. For now I did not actually cover the loop, but I'm just writing it for key in case keyword in kw list. Okay, keyword dot kw list. For now, if it is difficult, do not memorize anything, do not buy it anything. Okay, you will definitely write this after like now 15 days, so don't worry about it. Now Control Shift F10, if you do, it is actually printing everything one in each line. So here it's like a little readable. We do have false, none, true, as, assert, then asynchronous, sorry, async, and then break, class, continue, def for function definition, del for deleting anything, deleting any variable, cell, if. Finally, there are like many others. Okay, there are many others which is actually available here, and lambda is there, and then all these things. So this is how we can actually print keywords. So Python is having character set. We do have like keywords. We do have identifiers. What are the identifiers? The identifiers are actually string identifiers, integer identifiers. Then we do have like floating identifiers. Identifiers is nothing but like we do not actually identify based on the data types. We just give some name. Let's say sorry, we just give the name to a variable. Like if I'm giving like a variable equals to value, this variable is nothing but an identifier. Then if the value is string, then the variable type is string. If the value is number, then the variable type is number. I mean, in this case, if it is int, it is the integer, then it will be int type. If it is floating point number, then the type will be like float. If it is a list is nothing but like in other programming languages, we are having array, right? So similarly, list is there. Similarly, tuples is there. I mean, tuples we have in Python. We do have dictionaries in Python. We do have set in Python. There are many types of data types we do have. Okay, so this is how we can actually define the variables, and we can identify what is the type of the variables, and we call it as in technical terminology is actually identifier. Identifier is like nothing but the name of the variable. That's it. Okay, so now with this, what I've told you about like the keywords. I've told you about the variables or identifiers. Then I've told you about the character sets. Character sets, it can actually contain any characters. Like if you're writing a program, right, definitely we do have certain character sets, right? So we are actually using the Python character sets, and this is like language specific. You can actually Google it or like refer any book, because this is all theory, and you can actually definitely come to know many other things. So that's all about like Python character set. The next thing we'll see like what are the other things are there over here. Like we do have Python character set tokens, then identifiers, then keywords, and then we do have like literals. Literals are nothing but the values actually. Let's say for example, if I'm giving like num equals to 10, 10 is nothing but a literal. If I'm giving like name equals to 100, sorry, name equals to Subbu, then Subbu is nothing but a literal. If I'm giving like salary equals to 23, 4, 5, 6 dot 2, 3, this is nothing but a float. Okay. And let's say I want actually a list of numbers, I can say like nums. Then here I can specify 1, 2, 3. This is the nums. So this type of list. Now let's say I'm having a tuple. Tuple is, we define tuple like this. Okay. So in the tuple we can actually specify here, let's say 12, 23, then 20, 34. This is a tuple. And we do have something known as dictionaries. So don't worry about it. We'll come across and learn like in details. When time will come, I'm just going to tell you that. So this is like Subbu, and I can specify like n number of values over there. This is like key value. If you're actually familiar with JSON, you can actually understand like that is dictionary. Or if you're actually familiar with associate arrays, this is nothing but dictionaries in Python. Okay, and we do have like set data types. So this is our like various kind of data types, how it looks like. Okay, then we do have and literals is the right side of this is known as literals. Literals is like a 10 Subbu, here the floating by number, here is the list, this is a tuple, this is a dictionary. These are literals. Okay, and the left hand side, it is actually known as variables. In programming, definitely you must have heard about like L value and R value. Okay, this is a concept actually. This is not related to Python. This is a concept. L value and R value is the left side. Let's say for example, we are actually assigning num equals to 10. The L value is num, the R value is actually 10. Let's say consider nums and then followed by a list, right? So in this case, L value is nums, then the R value is actually 1, 2, 3. In case of tuple, like here, the L value is actually tup, and then the R value is actually 12, 23, and 34. In case of a dictionary, the L value is actually, in this example specifically, this is the L value, and then name equals name Subbu is a key value pair, and this is nothing but R value. So L value and R value, that's the concept of L value and R value. Delimiters is an interesting thing in Python. Let's say for example, if you look at here, what are the delimiters we are actually using? We are using like definitely for the statement, like the statement separator is nothing but a new line. The value separator we are actually using, it's comma. To enclose like list, we are using square brackets. To enclose a tuple, we are using round brackets, or you can call it as actually moon brackets. And then here in dictionary, we are having like delimiters are actually curly braces. So these are nothing but like the delimiters. Like how do we separate the values? Okay, and in this case, we do have actually the separator over here, like that is colon to differentiate between the key and then the value. So don't worry about all these things. It will look complex initially, but as you move on, maybe once you're familiar with like the data types and the implementations basically, then you'll be confident enough to handle this. Okay, so that's all about like the delimiters. Now the most interesting thing is actually operators, and we'll go one by one. Okay, let me paste it over here, and we'll just go through examples. The first one is actually arithmetic operators. Anyone actually wants to tell me like what are the arithmetic operators you are actually familiar with so far? What are the arithmetic operators you do have? Or we don't have like arithmetic operators in other programming languages. We do have arithmetic operators and
In
like
this, yeah,
addition,
in
Minus.
subtraction, multiplication, division, right? And then we do have uh, modular division to get the reminders, right? And then if we want to have something known as exponent, guys, remember this double asterisk is known as exponent. It is like exponent. If you are giving like a 2 double asterisk 3, it is 2 to the power 3, which is going to give you like 8. Okay, this is exponent operator. Similarly, this this is actually known as division operator. We do have something known as floor division operator. The floor division operator is nothing but, let's say for example, if you are giving 5 by 2, 5 by 2, and it is going to give like 2.5. But if you want floor division, that means if you are actually giving 5 floor division 2, it is actually going to give you 2. And if you want the remainder, you can definitely give 5% to it is actually going to give you 1. So these are the basic arithmetic operations what we can actually do. Let us write a program to get familiar with arithmetic operators. Okay. So now let me do that. New, then the Python file, arith operator, then Python file. Now I do have something like this. Let's say print 5 plus 2. Now I'm just giving here 5 minus 2, and we are giving 5 asterisk 2, then 5 divided by 2, 5 floor division by 2, 5 modulo division by 2, print 5 exponent. Remember, this is known as exponent operator. Okay, so when you are actually doing an exponent, you are carrying anything like an exponent operator. This is 5 to the power 2. So now here you can see the values. Control Shift F10. Here you can see the values here. The difference is, just look at here. Okay, 2.5. If you're giving 5 by 2 is 2.5. Think about you're writing developing something in application. You want to actually do a floor division operator. You don't want the arithmetic value 2.5, for example. In this case, we can also do one thing which is possible. You can do a casting of int of 5 by 2. If we do this, okay, if you do this, you can also get 2, which is very much similar to, either you can actually do this, or you can also do 5 floor division 2. Explicitly cast it to int, it is going to give you 2, 2.5 will be converted to 2, or else you can definitely give 5 floor division. This is known as floor division operator. Okay, let me tell you this one. Okay, technically it is known as floor division. Don't tell double slash operator. Double, there is nothing like double slash. So exponent, this is known as exponent operator. Okay, and this is known as modulo division. Okay, so these are the operations what we can actually do in Python. It is not like we can only use the values, we can also use variables. Let's say for example, I do have num1 equals to 100 and num2 equals to 3. Okay, now in this case what I can actually do is print, specify num1 plus num2. Okay, and then any operation you want to actually do, you can definitely do that. One interesting thing I'm just going to tell you here is num1 by num2, and then I'm just going to tell you here num1 star num2. Now look at here, Control Shift F10. If I'm going to do here, you can see, guys, anyone now we are, most of us are actually into IT. So now look at here, whenever we are actually giving 100 by 3, 100 by 3, you must have seen in all the programming languages, you can see it is 3 3 3 3 3 n number of times, but here it is saying 6, right? So now if I take this value, if I take this value and then say in Python, do one thing, multiple by 3, give me 100. Python cannot give you 100, guys. It is actually giving 100 or 0. So now if I'm giving just remove 6, now Control Shift F10, here you can see it is 99.99999. if you're giving 5 here, what it is going to give you is it is going to give you 100 or 0. Then while dividing it you are getting 6. While dividing it you are getting 6, but I'm multiplying by 5. I'm just using the last number as 5, and it is giving me 100. Okay, it is giving me 100 or 0, 100 dot 0, right? And when you are actually dividing it you are actually getting this one. Tomorrow I'll tell you the internals, how it is actually working, and what we should actually know as a programmer, know how the Python is actually dealing with the floating point arithmetic numbers, then internally how it is storing it and all these operations. I'm just going to share a note, or now we can actually run to the program. And one interesting thing, you can see it here, it is actually 14 characters, okay? Sorry, 14 digits actually, basically. Here you can count it down, 336, then 39, then here you can see 14 characters. And even if you are going by a calculator, right, and you are just giving 100 by 3, and the assignment for you guys, you should actually tell me tomorrow in my session, why we are actually getting 14 digits only, why it is restricted to 14 digits, why not 15, why not 18, why it is giving only 14 by default. The floating point numbers only 14 digits are actually here after the decimal point, right? So now here in this case in Windows calculator it is actually returning the last value is actually 3, wherein in the Python, we are actually getting it as actually 6. Now, if I'm getting this value as 3 and multiplying by 3, am I going to get 100? I'm getting 100. It is also, if you're multiplying by 6, you are getting also 100. Multiplying by 5, we are also getting 100. But if I'm giving the same value, same Windows type value 3 times, and manipulating it, it is actually not going to give me 100. So internally, how it is working, this is an interesting one. When you are actually dealing with banking applications, so you should not actually round up anything. We should actually take care of the manipulations, okay, while dealing with a large amount of data, or you are dealing with something related to data science and all these things. It matters a lot. But whenever you are actually dealing with your bank balance, it is fine, because we do not care if it is 3.3 or 3.5 or 3.7, 3.6. We don't, 33.6, we are not going to look at the floating point arithmetics. Think about a satellite launch, the parameter. If you reduce it, then God only knows where the satellite is going to go, going to end. Okay, whether the deployment will be successful, not successful, launch will be successful, not successful. It all depends. So you should be very careful, very much careful while dealing with the parameters for scientific applications. And in that time, we should not be actually take it as granted. Okay, so 2 floating point numbers is actually fine. No, if it is scientific application, we should not assume that, and we should not actually consider it that way. So these are the takeaways from here. Okay, so if I'm actually executing this, it is actually not going to return 100, this one. Okay, control shift F10, you can actually execute this and then see over here. Okay, so sorry, it is actually, I just did a mistake over here. If I'm giving not taking out, it is actually going to return this one, or I can simply directly print over here 99 point this one. Okay, so now given there is a difference, okay, in the small value also there is some difference, so we should not actually ignore it. So that's all about the arithmetic operations. The second type of operation is actually assignment operators. The assignment operators we have already gone through. The assignment operator is actually nothing but equals to symbol, and there are actually n number of assignments we have gone through, let's say variable equals to v1 equals to value. I can do that. v1 comma v2 equals to 10 comma 20. This is also you can do it like v1 equals to v2, then equals to v3 equals 3 4 5. This is also one kind of assignment. So these are the basic assignment operations what we can actually do. If you can remember these three, then we are actually done with assignment operator, and we have actually gone through 3 or 4 examples over there. So That's more than sufficient for now. Then comparison operator, we are using like double equals to for comparison, single equals to for assignment. Remember guys, single equals to use for comparison, sorry, assignment, double equals to is used for like comparison operator. But in cell, like now if we are actually working on bus, but again cell, you can actually do the assignment and comparison using single equals to as well, because their spacing and other things are there, right, in the syntax. So cell is capable enough of handling the assignment and comparison using single equal to, but in Python we must specify double equals to for the comparison operators. Okay, so now let's say, to give you some example here right now, the comparison operator, let me tell you here. Now, what the comparison operator is actually going to return in real time, comparison operator, then Python file here, and I can specify, let's say num1 equals to 10, num2 equals to 10. Now print, here I'm just specifying num1 equals to, num1 equals to num2. It is going to print as true. It is going to print as true because always comparison, guys, remember, comparison always returns, comparison always returns a boolean value, bool value, and it will be either true, or false, either true or false. Now, if I'm giving like num1 equals to num2, sorry, num1 double equals to num2, it is going to print true in this case, and true in capital case. It is case sensitive. Booleans are actually case sensitive. Now, if I'm specifying num1 not equals to num2, this is actually going to give me like false. If I'm giving like print 100 equals to 300, it is false. It is going to return false. If I'm giving print, let's say here a equals to a equals to a, it is also false. If I'm giving like print Python equals to Python, it is also false, because string comparisons are actually case sensitive. String comparisons are actually case sensitive. If I'm giving like print py, that is Python equals to py, it is actually true. It is actually true. By default, the string comparisons are actually case sensitive. It is not like we can only compare numbers and then we can compare strings. We can also compare like floating point. We can also compare floating point. Let's say now print, I can specify here 100.3 equals to 100.3. Okay, so it is also going to print true. Now look at here. This is how it is going to give us the output true, then false, 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 false first, then true and true. And if you are actually giving something like this, okay, something like this, let's say for example, I'm just giving like a print 10 not equals to, here I'm just giving like my Yahoo, it is actually going to give me false. Okay, now here we can see whether it is actually going to give us false or error. Let us see. Okay, false or error, it is, let us see like now what is going to give us. It is actually going to give us true. Why true? 10 is not equals to, sorry, I did a mistake, it should be true only, because 10 is not equals to Yahoo. That is correct. I thought like no, it is equals to only. Now if I'm giving like 10 equals to Yahoo, in this case it is actually going to give me false. Now control shift of 10. But real-time scenarios, we are definitely not going to deal with we are not definitely going to deal with comparing string with numbers. Now I'm just removing the spaces here. Okay, that's it. It is flagging to there is something wrong with the syntax, so I'm just removing it. So this is all about how we can actually deal with the comparison. So in the comparison operators, basically we are going to use it in the conditional statements. Conditional statements. In the conditional statements, we are actually going to use it, and the operators here are actually double equals to and not equals to. Okay, that's comparison operators. Similarly, we do have logical operators. Logical operators. Let us start the program. This will be my last program for today. Then I'll take up the question. So now, new Python file, logical operator. Okay, in the logical operator, I'm just going to print a number. Let's say number equals to 100. Okay, here I'm just specifying print number less than 200. Number less than 200. I am giving extra spaces. Number less than 200, and this is something which I can give, which is going to return me. Sorry, which is going to return me true, and this is actually going to return me false. The first one is actually going to return me true. The second one is actually going to return me false. Okay, now Control Shift F10, if I'm executing here the program, here you can say true and false. Let's say I'm just specifying print number greater than 90 and number less than 150. In this case, just look at here. Definitely my number is actually greater than 90 and number is actually less than 150. Now if I'm actually executing this Control Shift F10, here you can see it is actually giving me not true. So the and is actually nothing but a logical operator here. Okay, this is actually going to give me true. And let's say if I'm giving print, uh, here I can specify or let's say for example print number greater than 500, number is not greater than 500, or number equals to 100. Okay, in this case it's actually going to give me true, because in this case here you can see number greater than 500 is actually false. Then the next comparison is actually going to be executed, that is nothing but number equals to 100. In case of OR operator, if both the conditions, either condition or both the conditions are actually true, then it is actually going to return as true. To revisit, we do have a AND table and a OR table, right? In the AND table, how the AND table looks like: true is true, true false is false, false true is actually false, and false is actually false. This is the AND table. Now OR table is actually true is true false is true, false true is true, false is false. Okay, so now considering this, we can actually use the and or operator. Like in this case, we are using or operator. The first condition is actually false, the second condition is actually true, so it is going to return as true. In this case, it's an AND table. Number greater than 90 is true. Number less than 150 is 150 is actually true, so it is going to return true. If I'm actually changing this, from less than to, I'm just specifying number greater than 150, it is actually definitely going to return me as false. Okay, now Control Shift F10, if I'm doing, here you can see false, true, false, and true, and all these things. Okay, so it returns true or false accordingly. Now let's say print, I'm just giving print not number greater than 100. print not number greater than 100. Now let us see like now what it is going to give us. The last one is actually giving us like now true. Number is actually not, for example, number is not greater than 100. We are negating it. We are negating it, not number greater than 100. Let's say if I'm giving, in this case, it is actually giving me true. If I'm giving like number equals to 100, not number equals to 100, in this case, it is actually going to give me false. Number is equals to 100, it is true. The negation of true is actually false. In this case, number greater than 100 is false. The negation that is not a false is actually true. Okay, and real-time use cases we are actually going to deal during the string comparison while checking the items in the list. Let's say we are having list of customer IDs, okay, or list of payment details and or list of customer names, and you were searching for like a certain pattern. Let's say if not Subbu in the list, that means you are checking like if Subbu is not there in the list, append. So those kind of operation we can actually do it using not operator. Let's say for example, your real-time condition is you are reading a configuration file and storing it in a list and checking if the server name, let's say server name is S1 in the list and server name S2 in the list. Let's say server S1 is in the list, S2 in the list, then go ahead and do some operations or else don't do the operation. So those cases we can actually handle it using the logical operators. So the remaining type of operators I'm just going to tell you tomorrow because identity operators and membership is going to take some time to understand. And bitwise operator, I don't know in the real time how many of you have used like a bitwise operator so in the real time for application developments, but ideally if you're actually into electrical or electronic circuit designing and all these things like the real time implementation, we may deal with like bitwise operators there. But so far, if you are not having any knowledge on the bitwise operator, I'll just share a documentation like which can actually give you an understanding on bitwise operators. I can actually quickly go over the bitwise operator. I don't want to spend time on bitwise operator tomorrow, much time. We can quickly revisit what is the bitwise operator and how to deal with bitwise operator. Bitwise operators basically. And there is something known as shift operator like left shift and then the right shift like double less than basically here like the shift operator, left shift or right shift operator. These are the things are there, so we can actually go through it. So with